Hey, I'm Kenneth Wajda. I'm a professional photographer here in Colorado. Welcome to another one of my photo chats. So let's just say from the outset, I am not a camera collector. I do have more than one camera, but I am not a collector. I'm not interested in cameras for shows. I only will buy cameras if they come into my possibility list without me having to spend much money, and if it's something I can make work and I want to photograph with. So there was the great super duper garage sale. It happens once a year in Colorado, and it was this past weekend at the local fairgrounds. So I went and I ended up buying two cameras for $15 total. And one is a 35 millimeter camera and one's a medium format. Because why can't you get a medium format camera and a 35 for $15? You can. And this is the medium format. It's a Zenobia. It's a Zenobia 35 mm or 120 camera, and it's actually a 645 camera. It shoots a 645 negative. So it shoots 16 vertical frames on a 120 spool. And I always check to make sure the focus works, because sometimes these are glued shut. Ricos are notorious for having used a lubricant that turns into absolute cement, and you can't budge the focus, but this focus works. It doesn't have a rangefinder, it's just guesstimate, but it would be fine for street and things like that. It has a shutter that works, but there's a little problem. Sometimes when you set the shutter, that times it worked. It's got a left shutter release. Sometimes when you set the shutter, it's working now. Sometimes it doesn't catch. Sometimes there's something going on with it that it doesn't catch. And if it doesn't catch, what it's going to do is you're going to cock the shutter and it's going to release right away. It's going to expose your ceiling or the sky, and you're going to waste the frame. So that's not so good. But I knew that was the case when I was looking at it. And I looked and saw how this shutter button linked to this little shutter release down here, and how if I just hold that shutter release, I can make sure it catches. And now it seems to be catching. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm not a camera collector. I don't want to shoot this if I'm just going to waste film. But I do like the idea of shooting a good Japanese lens, coated lens, camera probably from the mid-50s, early 60s, folding. It goes so small. I can put a 120 camera in my coat pocket. It's so small, and I have a camera that shoots a larger negative than a 35, and it's pocketable. To me, that's worthwhile. But again, it's got to work, and I don't want to fight that shutter. It's so funny. It was just right before I started this recording, I was like testing it, and it was still releasing instead of catching. It fixed itself. My goal is, again, I check all the shutters. The shutters are working. It's a leaf shutter, so I know I can hold the camera at pretty slow shutter speeds because it's so soft of a shutter, being a leaf shutter. So that was part of the $15. And then I know what happened. I'm forgetting which one's which. It was the other camera that has the shutter issue. So this little case, this little camera, it's a Bolda. The old Bolda brand. It's German. And when you open this, this is the one that it's sometimes not catching. No wonder it was catching. So watch this. If I set the shutter, see, it sometimes comes right back. This should stay up there, but it doesn't. It shoots. I don't want it to shoot. So these are mechanical. There's a shutter release right here. I can look into the body and see the little metal lever that pushes the shutter. And I know, okay, so maybe the shutter isn't fully retracted back. So what if I push that shutter and retract it back? And what if now I set the shutter? Hey, look, now it stays. So now I can use this camera and I can set it up for a picture and I can take a picture and it works fine. I can advance the film. I don't think there's any prevention from double exposure. So if I don't advance the film, I can just shoot one frame over and over. But then when I go to set the shutter again, it doesn't stay. Again, when that happens, you know after every shot you cannot just pull on that, because when you release it, it's going to expose the film. But if you just press on this little shutter deal and you pull it up till it clicks, then it holds. So this is the camera that I love the idea. It's a small little 35 folding camera with a great Schneider 50 f.2 Xenon Schneider lens. That's a great lens. And it's smaller than a Retina. It's smaller than most folding cameras, and it's great 35 millimeter quality in my coat pocket. If I have two coat pockets, I can put the 120 on one side, the 35 in the other, and I have all of $15 invested in the cameras. It's a little piece of art. It has a viewfinder that's a little tiny little viewfinder, and it does have a rangefinder, but the rangefinder is pretty dark and hard to see. I would probably just use it at 12 feet and shoot it for street. And there's even a little deal where this viewfinder has a little ability to go up and down. Can you see that? When you focus, it's actually a built-in parallax. And so as you focus close, it tilts down a little bit. And so it's got a built-in little bit of parallax correction. Fascinating how they made things back then. And I've often heard people say, oh, when my parents used to take photos, my grandparents used to take photos, they used to always cut people's heads off. Well, the only way that would happen is the lens is down here, and you say, I'm going to take a picture of, but I get too close, and the viewfinder is higher, but the lens is lower, and so the viewfinder is seeing this, and the lens is seeing this, and it cuts their head off. It wasn't so much that they were bad photographers, it was that they didn't understand you can't get within closer than about 3 feet with these cameras without cutting heads off, and you have to compensate. If you're that close, after you compose, you might need to move the camera up the distance from the lens to the viewfinder. But this is a little Wajda folding camera. It's got a great little 52 f2 lens, shutter speeds from 1 second to 500th of a second. Goes in this little case. The guy said it was in the family forever. And the pair of cameras was only $15. There was even a roll of Plus X in that. A roll of Plus X that had not been advanced past picture 1. So I even got a roll of film. And I'll shoot that because I bet the Plus X will be okay. It looked like a 1980s era Plus X. And because it's a 125 speed film, I bet it didn't lose all of its ability to make a photo without fogging. And he said it was stored in a closet. So 2 cameras, a little garage sale, $15 later. I intend to shoot them. I make these videos to talk about what are some of the cameras that come into my world, but everything I take, I want to make photos with. I want to create with. I don't want to put these on a shelf. If I end up thinking that it's not something I'll shoot, I'll move it on to somebody else. But my goal is, I can't afford to spend a lot of money on cameras. I can spend a little bit. I can spend $15. And sometimes you end up with a whole bunch of little fun cameras that are a treat to use. I even love the fact that they used to put great leather cases on these cameras back then. That kept the camera clean and nice and protected. And people often put that into another case. So by the time they were done with all the casing, these cameras were stored pretty well and remain pretty well protected and ready to still use. All right, that's my camera find. They're out there. Find them. Hey, if you're enjoying these, hit the subscribe button. If you can support, hit the Patreon. Thanks to all my supporters. I appreciate you. I'll be back next time. We'll talk more photography. As always, here's the good light.